That's the end.
All right, here we go. Let's go to this next one about the impending global food shortage.
Oh boy.
So, a nice heavy topic. And also, this guy has so many ads in his video. I'm gonna have to skip some of it because he's sponsored by Manscaped, and he just talks about his ad for like a minute and a half. So, here we go.
This video is brought to you by Manscaped. Stick around to hear more about the discount they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, before getting started, I need to warn everyone, this video will not be fun to watch. It might be enjoyable to watch for some of you, but it isn't going to make anyone feel good, it's not going to bring anyone joy, and it's not going to try and put some sort of positive spin on things, because global markets right now are anything and everything other than positive. This video is going to discuss a series of well-established...
So, before he gets into that, he's not wrong about that. This is something that the World Health Organization and the United Nations actually talked about when they were encouraging countries to not lock down, the WHO was saying to lock down, but the United Nations said don't lock down because they were talking about 200 million plus people dying of starvation due to the lockdowns. So I just want to... This is what...
And now we've had a bunch of other... things that have happened that are going to exacerbate this to a much larger degree. And I have a little bit of background on some of that when we get to that point.
Events that, in my opinion, in tandem with each other, are going to cause global food shortages well and truly beyond anything that current media sources are willing to report. Now, the idea here is to connect a series of dots, which will, in turn, bring us to a logical conclusion, but it is entirely possible that those of you watching right now will come...
Oh my god. Okay, let's get past this intro because he's really... Okay, whatever. I can't find the point, so we'll just let it go.
It is not invalid, and while I may disagree with you, it's important to recognize that just because data suggests one thing, with a high probability I might add, it does not mean that such a thing will happen with any degree of certainty.
So essentially this whole first minute is just a giant disclaimer that if he's wrong, he doesn't want people to blame him. That's pretty much what he's saying.
Yeah. Basically, if you want to call me a doomer and say, stop exaggerating, everything is going to be completely fine, feel free to do so. And with that out of the way, let's officially get started. I want to begin by painting a picture of overindulgence and critical resources. Increasingly affluent countries, like the United States, for example, consume a disproportionate amount of grain per person.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's true, mostly because we can, but also because Americans are on average way fatter than the rest of the world.
And we also put grains in everything. We have a lot of processed food. A lot of our processed food is primarily a grain of one type or another, or partially, corn syrup and
right, yeah,
all the rest.
Yeah. Also, I want to point out, user says there is no food shortage. My neighbors are fat. I could make plenty of soap and canvas using them.
Oh, wow.
And Jared says the stock market is crashing. I was smart to get out when Biden got elected and to buy another house. Too bad the housing market will crash next. Yeah, that's
a good thing. That's a good thing.
It's the housing market's already starting. The bubble's starting to burst.
Yeah, no, the market needs to crash. That way regular people can go buy houses at decent prices.
Yeah.
And according to an analysis done by Lester Brown in the climate publication Grist, Americans consume, on average, 1,763 pounds of grain per person per year. This total is actually broken down into direct and indirect consumption, but when compared to other nations on Earth, such as India, as an example, where residents consume, on average, just 440 pounds per year, with very little comparable indirect consumption, it can be seen as a rather colossal figure.
I do want to point out this article, I don't know anything about grist, but I see articles like this all the time where it's like feeding the world means hogging less grain, and what that means to these people is we need to start looking for alternative food sources, and their number one go-to is start eating the bugs and eat the soy.
And I want to point out that this does say that at the average, the U.S. average, 1,763 pounds of grain per person annually. That's for food. In other words, what you eat and feed what the animals eat. So they're counting like when you eat a cow, however much of a cow you eat in a year, that's what they're also including in that.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's everything, and it's any soy, any corn syrup,
Yes.
all that stuff is included.
And then there's grain in pet food too, right?
yeah,
I'm pretty
Yep.
sure. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, I don't know if they would add that in this average. I don't know where we got this
Yeah,
average from.
yeah.
So,
Right,
but
Right.
that could be the case. I don't know.
right.
is the functionality of commercial livestock, where, according to the Cornell Chronicle, even back in 1997, the grain that is consumed by livestock in the United States alone could feed over 800 million people. All of this is to say that grain is obviously important. However, when accurately assessing just how important
And this is it too. Like the people that are going to starve to death are not here in the U.S.
No.
They are in third world countries, but it's because our harvest.
But there's
is
a
all screwed
caveat
up.
to that.
Well, yes, but real quick, our harvest is really going to be screwed up because of the issues with fertilizer.
Yeah, which is directly because of basically of what we've done to Russia.
Yes.
So here's that caveat I wanted to make. You know, at first I was kind of worried about, like, with this whole food shortage thing. We're not going to go hungry. Food prices will spike. That certainly will happen. And we will see higher food prices than we're seeing now. And my first worry was about third world countries. When this all started, it's not really anymore, because pretty much all of Africa is now being fed by Russia. And Russia, up until this point, has been keeping those contracts. Like, they're not, and they're saying, now this is what they're saying, I don't know if it's true or not, they're saying that they can continue to fulfill those contracts. We are not getting those contracts, not only from Russia, but from Belarus and Ukraine, right? So there's a huge issue here. It isn't that we're going to go hungry and I'll die off, but the price of food is going to skyrocket, you know, probably sometime later this fall, because that's when most of what we're eating now was produced last year. And we live, like, grain wise, we kind of live on a year by year basis. So if you start watching the grain futures, they're starting to tick up, right? So
Yep.
it's probably going to get bad price wise.
Buckle up.
in terms of global food supply, it becomes incredibly complex because grain is a foundational part of the food pyramid. And when you factor in relative consumption, such as the United States, on average consuming 4 times as much per person when compared to India, it becomes almost impossible. Basically, grain is the foundation of our food system, not just for actual grain products.
I also want to point out, like, not only are we much fatter than other countries, we're also much taller than most other countries. Like, people in the US are, on average, a lot bigger than people in other countries.
Yeah, so it's not a real clean correlation.
Right.
But also for meat, therefore dairy as well, and ultimately almost everything that we consume. So why am I saying all this? The answer is complicated, but the short version is that a reduction, even a very small relative reduction in global grain supply, can have severe consequences. And today, when looking at all the factors combined from a series of recent events, I would like to make the case that we will see not a small reduction in grain supply, but a large one, which will have extreme impact on many nations around the globe, moderate impact on others, and very few people in the world will be able to entirely avoid the consequences.
Well, and we already know, like, we're already being affected by this. General Mills already raised their prices.
So, and I can tell you just personally, so I buy sacks of flour, 50-pound sacks. And
Yeah, you said sack.
I said sack. Well, so last year I was buying 50-pound sacks of flour at like a little over $17. I might have to go back and look at the receipts. I just went and bought another 400 pounds of flour, and for each 50-pound sack, I paid $39 compared to last year when I was paying
that's crazy.
$17.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all getting way more expensive.
Before going further, it's time for the video sponsor.
Okay, here we go.
Father's Day is coming up very soon. Big thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring the channel. That we are facing right now will be far more severe
A
than
minute and a half of an ad. That's nuts.
And while he's talking about that, if you go onto Amazon right now and look at a 50-pound sack of flour, it's about $100 to $120, depending on what kind you want. I get mine from the Amish, So the price that I'm paying is probably much cheaper because they buy it in massive bulk, and then I buy it from them.
Right.
Let's get into specifics here. March 22nd, 2022, World Food Program Executive Director for the United Nations, David Beasley, warned that we should get ready for hell in terms of global food supply. He warns that a coming shortfall in developing nations of critical grain can lead to destabilization and mass migration. But rather than simply focus...
And we're already seeing all of that. That's already
Yes.
happening. Like, and this is the crazy thing, right? Because they're like, oh, we might see this. And it's really just... They're easing into it, right? They're gonna like, it's already like, let's say it's at level 10, right? They're gonna say, you know, oh, it's a level 2, and then a month later, oh, it's a level 6, and then oh, it's a, you know, level, now we're at level 10, but by that time, then the struggle's already at level 20.
Well, and to be clear, it's also hard to tell how much food prices are going up because of lack of the product. You have to remember at the same time, gas prices are an all-time high in the United States. Everything is shipped by diesel. So how much of this is because diesel, like transportation costs have gone up versus the cost of the actual grain? You actually have to go look at the markets and take a look at what grain, you know, is trading at today. I have looked, not today, but I was looking a couple weeks ago. Actually, most of the costs that we're seeing right now, most of it is diesel. That's what we're seeing. Like, our food prices have not gone up yet, really, because of any kind of food shortage.
Right,
Most of this at the moment
diesel,
is all because of diesel prices.
Right,
Now, and shipping, yeah. So when this hits, right, when there actually are shortages, or, you know, when I say shortages, I don't mean that you won't be able to get it. What I mean is that overhead, that supply isn't necessarily there. You might still be able to buy it, but there's less units of it, so they're going to charge more for it. That I don't think has hit yet. Now, I'm not, you know, this is just my amateur look at what's going on, but that's how I see it right now.
All right.
Focusing on the words of one expert, I'd like to connect a series of dots here that go well beyond what...
By the way, if you haven't given the stream a thumbs up, do that. That's really helpful.
Smash
that like button.
Oh,
like that smash button. Do it for Mugs Jugs.
Do it for the jugs.
I owe you a lot of Coke.
Yeah, I know you do.
Nobody clip that out, please.
A condensed explanation and suggest, at least to me personally, that the grain shortages that we are facing right now will be far more severe than anything predicted thus far. First and foremost, shortages will be caused by the war in Ukraine. This is one aspect of the problem that is well documented and understood, but to thoroughly explain and provide visuals in the process, we need to look at the import-export market for wheat and corn. For starters, both Russia and Ukraine are some of the top producers and exporters of wheat, with substantial growth in wheat production for both of these countries during 2019 and 2020. When it comes to corn, Ukraine is once again a high-level player in the export market, producing 12.8% of the global supply by itself in 2020. These numbers, of course, are reflective of a pre-war environment, and of course, open kinetic-based warfare is going to hinder production. There is a significant downturn in grain production when a country is being actively invaded.
Right, yeah, so the Russia-Ukraine thing is a big deal for that, just because, you know, Ukraine is the big wheat and grain producer, and with an active war, then that's kind of a little bit of a distraction from the agriculture.
Yeah.
With territory
Just slightly, yeah.
seized and occupied, especially during planting season, I might add. But something far more damaging is a Russian blockade of Ukrainian ports. In an effort to
Yep, there's that. So, I think the rest of this is really, these are things that we are aware of, but it's, you know, just something to keep your eyes on, because it's going on and no one is talking about it. Everyone's downplaying it. The most I've seen about this is a 2-minute clip from ABC essentially saying this isn't happening.
Well, it is, but this kind of goes back to what I alluded to earlier. This Russian blockade of Ukrainian grain shipping, it's not a blockade in the like historical sense. Basically, they've taken over the port cities, and so they are shipping grain. Like, grain is still being grown in Ukraine. I'm sure it's impacted, like how much, but they are still shipping. They're just not shipping to countries that have been, let's just say, against Russia or sanctioning Russia. That's why I said early on I was worried about Africa, because I thought that they would take a much larger hit. That doesn't seem to be the case. We'll find out, but that doesn't seem to be the case, because Russia, to a great extent, feeds Africa. And now that Russia's taken over these ports, it's not that the blockade is stopping grain, they're just stopping it from us.
Right.
The collective West.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly spot on.